and would now request a staff briefing on Substitute House Bill 1399. I believe we have Ms. Langer and Ms. Jeffrey joining us this afternoon for that. Good afternoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. For the record, Lena Langer, staff to the Community Safety Committee. Substitute House Bill 1399 concerns sheriffs, police chiefs, marshals, and police matrons. By way of background, actually, in the interest of time, I will not provide the background I usually would, but I will mention briefly that eligibility requirements for police chiefs and marshals are on page 2 of the bill report. Sheriffs must obtain certification from the Criminal Justice Training Commission, or CJTC, within 12 months of assuming office. Sheriff's duties are enumerated in statute and can be found on page 3 of the bill report. Additionally, a peace officer or corrections officer applicant who has a conditional employment offer must submit to a background investigation. The current background investigation components are included on pages 3 to 4 of the bill report. Turning to Substitute House Bill 1399, I will brief 5 main changes made by the bill. First, eligibility criteria for appointment as police chief or marshal are amended so that the same requirements apply for the position for any city or town regardless of size or class. New or amended criteria for appointment as police chief or marshal provide that the person must be age 25 or older, have not been convicted under foreign law of the equivalent to a felony, have not been convicted of a gross misdemeanor involving moral turpitude, dishonesty, fraud, or corruption at any time, have not engaged in conduct meeting the criteria requiring denial or revocation of certification, have at least 2 years of regular full-time law enforcement agency employment with a government law enforcement agency, have obtained certification within 12 months of assuming office unless extended by the CJTC, and if not yet certified, have met the CJTC background investigation requirements for peace officers, and if certified, have met background investigation requirements within 6 months of appointment, confirming that the person meet the eligibility requirements outlined in the bill. Eligibility criteria regarding discharge from military service, a high school diploma or equivalent certificate, and citizenship are unchanged. Current police chiefs or marshals at the time of the effective date are not required to meet background investigation requirements unless they seek appointment to a different department. A vacancy is created if the person does not maintain certification, is decertified, or other eligibility requirements are not met. Second, that was all just the first point. Second, a person filing for candidacy for sheriff or seeking appointment must meet the same eligibility requirements as police chiefs or marshals. If the person is not yet certified, the person must meet the CJTC background investigation requirements for peace officers. If certified, the person must meet background investigation requirements within 6 months. The person filing for candidacy must submit a background investigation request to the Washington State Patrol at least 2 months before the filing deadline. The Washington State Patrol must submit the completed background investigation to the CJTC for verification at least 45 days before the filing deadline. The CJTC must post a list of all candidates for sheriff who have passed the background investigation. The same provisions apply as they did for chiefs and marshals regarding current sheriffs and vacancies in the office. The duties of the sheriff are amended. In the interest of time, please see page 6 of the bill report for a list. Third, if a law enforcement agency or a sheriff's office uses volunteers or specially commissioned officers, unless they are certified, the volunteers or specially commissioned officers may not engage in actions involving use of law enforcement authority, carrying or use of firearms or other weapons, or tracking with dogs other than for search and rescue. Volunteers and specially commissioned officers may assist with other functions, including helping with traffic management. Fourth, concerning changes for the CJTC generally and background investigations, the CJTC must prioritize giving sheriffs, chiefs, and marshals access to training required for certification. Law enforcement or correctional agencies that previously employed or received an application from an applicant must disclose employment or application information within 30 days of receiving a written request from an employing agency conducting a background investigation. Officers must indicate any prior application material and background investigations conducted while seeking employment with other law enforcement agencies. By August 30th, 2026, the CJTC must issue guidelines with criteria for counties, cities, agencies, and the CJTC to apply in determining whether an applicant is suitable for employment. In developing the guidelines, the CJTC must seek input from individuals who have experience in reviewing law enforcement background investigations and others. For a list of the individuals, please refer to the bill report on pages 7 to 8. The CJTC must include summary records of certification revocations obtained via default or surrender, certification denials, and all cases that were resolved with disciplinary action annually on its website. Finally, the chapter relating to police matrons is repealed. That concludes my remarks.
Thank you very much.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. For the record, Sydney Jeffrey, staff to this committee. Moving to the fiscal impacts, there's a fiscal note available in your EBB for substitute House Bill 1399. The total estimated cost across all impacted agencies is $598,000 in the 25-27 biennium, $277,000 in the 27-29 biennium, and $571,000 in the 29-31 biennium, all of which is NGFO. Changes in the bill will require additional legal services requests of the Attorney General's office. The agency estimates that new legal services will be nominal and at present can be absorbed within current expenditure authority. Washington State Patrol assumes one sheriff's candidate investigation per county during each county's respective election year, resulting in 35 candidate investigations in fiscal year 2026, 2 in fiscal year 2027, and 1 in fiscal year 2028. 2028, assuming the costs associated with these counts, the State Patrol estimates a fiscal impact of $268,000 in fiscal year 2026, $94,000 in fiscal year 2027, and $47,000 in fiscal year 2028, with this pattern repeating every 4 years in alignment with election cycles. The agency estimates expenditures predominantly impacting the transportation budget State Patrol highway account, with $72,000 in general fund state dollars and $229,000 in State Patrol highway dollars, for a total of $302,000 in the 25-27 biennium. The Criminal Justice Training Commission, or CJTC, estimates a fiscal impact of $297,000 in the 25-27 biennium and $270,000 per biennium thereafter. Initial costs are for one-time consultation from psychologists and polygraphers as the agency develops the best practice standards, 1 FTE to review and verify background checks for sheriff's, chief of police, and marshal candidates, and one-time equipment costs for the additional FTE. Ongoing costs are associated with the salary and benefits of the additional staff person. In addition to these estimates, there are indeterminate costs to local governments regarding any fees associated with background checks, limitations of authority put on volunteer and specially commissioned officers, and record retention of applications. Overall, the bill would require that law enforcement agencies make changes to their hiring practices, record keeping, and use of volunteers and specially commissioned officers. The required changes will vary across jurisdictions, and therefore the total impacts are indeterminate. And that concludes my remarks.
Excellent. Thank you both very much. Questions for Ms. Langer or Ms. Jeffrey? Representative Penner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I understand this bill correctly, it changes where the oath of office is sworn, or at least it specifies the state of Washington, not the United States. But also in that statement talks about interpreting and applying, how those laws are interpreted and applied by the state Supreme Court. Are all laws interpreted and applied by the state Supreme Court? Is that clear for potential sheriffs?
So I think you're referring to the duties of sheriffs, which is amended to say to enforce the Washington state constitution and laws as applied or interpreted by the state Supreme Court. So the bill doesn't reference the oath, but that is, I think, the part that you're referring to.
Representative Couture.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Lena, in Section 15, it repeals a few different acts, one of them being RCW 3566050, persons under arrest in separate quarters. Can you explain to us what that repeal means in reality?
So Section 15 is repealing the chapter relating to police matrons. So all of these sections are referring to police matrons. Would you like me to talk more about? I would love to talk more about police matrons. I actually did look this up. So police matrons were assigned with overseeing females that were arrested and detained in jail.
Thank you for the
They're
background.
older statutes.
Yeah.
Oh, and also I wanted to correct, in my briefing, I said that the CJTC must issue guidelines by August 30th, but it's June 30th, and I don't know why I said August.
Understandable. Are there any other questions? Thank you both very much for your in-depth briefing, and we'll now go to public testimony. Vice Chair Macri.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll call up our in-person testifiers, James McMahon and Dawn Land, and then online, if we could have Sharon Byrne, April Morrow, and John Axtell to begin. And James, please go ahead. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I'm James McMahon, Policy Director with the Association of Sheriffs and Police Chiefs, here to testify opposed to House Bill 1399. We do not oppose minimum standards for sheriffs and police chiefs. We are troubled that our planned meeting with the prime sponsor of the bill was canceled 2 days after we submitted a counter proposal to the bill, and we've not been allowed to negotiate the provisions of this bill since. We believe that at least two provisions of this bill violate sections of the Washington State Constitution, that being Article 1, Section 19 and Article 1, Section 33. We shudder to think of the public safety ramifications of the language requiring sheriffs and their deputies to enforce all laws of the state of Washington, and we think you should too. We fear for the public safety consequences regarding the language about the use of volunteers and specially commissioned deputies, and we remain ready to sit at the table to negotiate this policy if we are allowed to be heard.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And Dawn, welcome.
Thank you. My name is Dawn Land, and I'm asking you to vote no on House Bill 1399 today. Section 15 of 1399 repeals the legal requirement for our prisons to be segregated by sex. This would be very expensive for Washington State. Our state currently allows males who claim to be women to be housed in the women's prison in Purdy, and we have already seen financial repercussions of these dangerous policies. Last year, Mazi Clark Sanchez filed a federal lawsuit against the DOC after being locked in a cell with Christopher Williams, a fully intact male who sexually assaulted her many times. If Section 15 is made law, it would make our prisons fully co-ed. The need for condoms, birth control, prenatal care will drain the DOC budget while the number of lawsuits skyrocket. An article in the Tennessee Star revealed how many male inmates are claiming to be women so they can be housed with women. Their intention is to impregnate incarcerated females and create $1 million baby when the woman sues the state. Section 15 is the $1 million baby portion of this bill. Washington State cannot afford 1399. Please vote no.
Thank you very much. And now we'll turn to our online testifiers, starting with Sharon. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I'm with the Women's Liberation Front, and we oppose this bill. Does the state of
Sharon,
Washington
can you just
intend
state
to
your name for the record?
Sure, Sharon Byrne. Does the state of Washington intend to violate international human rights law, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and the Nelson Mandela minimum rules for treatment of prisoners by committing a heinous state-authored assault on the human rights of females in your custody? You are legislating the mass rape of incarcerated women and deliberately deceiving the good people of Washington by inserting one line at the bottom of this bill on sheriffs that repeals the code requiring prisoners be housed separately by sex. We doubt the sheriffs have pleaded with you to do this. Perhaps the subversive attempt to make Washington jails and prisons co-ed without the public's knowledge arises from the lawsuit filed against you by Mazi Clark, raped by a biological male and convicted sex offender Christopher Williams after the state placed him in her cell. You're going to unleash mass-scale rapes with this and make your correctional facilities co-ed. Legislators, please be at least honest with your constituents and create a standalone bill or a ballot initiative so the good people of Washington know you plan to put men in women's prisons instead of hiding it in the bottom of a sheriff's bill. It is impossible to estimate and truly appropriate the awful human,
Thank you very much.
incarcerated women that you will.
Thank you, Sharon. April, please go ahead.
Hi, my name is April Morrow, founder of Sovereign Women Speak. I'm an advocate for 550 plus women inside Washington Correctional Center for Women who are being forced to live and shower with highly violent criminal males who have raped, murdered, women, and molested children. Many female inmates suffer from PTSD from being raped and molested or abused before they were ever incarcerated. This is unjust, reckless, and dangerous. It's also very expensive. It also violates 3 of the women's constitutional rights. Housing males that identify as women, they have a Y chromosome that will never turn into an X, no matter how long they grow their hair, how much makeup they wear, or how many hormones they take. The women inside of WCCW are being traumatized by these men. I highly suggest that you read Trans by Helen Joyce and Irreversible Damage by the Transgender Craze Seducing Our Daughters. I ask Washington State to please vote con on this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, and we'll now turn to John.
John Axtell, taxpayer protected by my sheriff alone. Decisions are best made by people closest to the problem. Legislators and commissioners should recommend but not decide anything. Anyone who has the tenacity to consider that the requirements of a police chief in Spokane or Seattle needs to have the same requirements as a police chief in a small town with 150 people in it is delusional. We need to let the people that elect the people that elect sheriffs control the sheriffs, not a committee, not legislators. You don't understand my problems. You don't understand the problems of our sheriff, and you don't understand the problems of our county. Let us be and defeat this insanity. Thank you very much for your time, and best of luck.
Thank you, John. And we'll now turn to our last number of testifiers. We have Amy Ichikawa, Vanessa Gutierrez, and Heather Kelly. And we'll begin with Amy. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Commissioners. My name is Amy Ichikawa. I'm a founding member and the executive director of an organization called Woman to Woman, where I work directly with women in prison across the country. I'm also formerly incarcerated. I'm speaking in opposition to HB 1399 specifically because of the language that was slid into the last paragraph. Section 15 would repeal authorities' ability to house people under arrest separately. This non-definitive language is going to put all incarcerated individuals in danger by disabling law enforcement from being able to do the most important part of their job, which is to keep people in their custody safe. There are many reasons why separation is needed in a carceral setting. It would be completely negligent to house people from rival gangs together, to house victims and abusers together, co-defendants, to house reproductively compatible individuals together, for example. This loosely worded terminology is going to end up costing your state a lot of money. Lawsuits will be filed for negligence, pregnancies will be costly, prophylactics will need to be readily available. There will never be enough mental health services available to help the incarcerated population cope with the trauma that will definitely ensue if this becomes law. I strongly urge the committee to please vote no on HB 1399.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And we'll now turn to Vanessa. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Ormsby and members of the committee. My name is Vanessa Gutierrez. I am co-deputy director of the Northwest Immigrant Rights Project, a statewide legal services organization. I'm testifying in strong support of House Bill 1399. House Bill 1399 is an important bill for the immigrant communities of Washington State. It will ensure that professional standards for law enforcement leaders are updated and that they apply to all law enforcement leaders across the state. Law enforcement officers' interactions with communities that lack permanent immigration status are important for cooperation, safety, and protection. Yet today, many fear they may not be protected during calls for help, and that instead some in state and local law enforcement will work with federal immigration enforcement agents despite our state's constitutional and legal protections. Enhancing the standards of professionalism and updating these laws will help build the trust with immigrant communities, especially during these times. This bill is one more step along with others you have taken to help ensure that all community members in Washington State are protected. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll now turn to Heather. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon, Chair Ormsby and Ranking Minority Member Couture and committee members. My name is Heather Kelly, and I'm here on behalf of the League of Women Voters of Washington, a nonpartisan organization with members and supporters in every county of the state. Let's refocus. This bill is common sense legislation that advances good government and democratic principles and will enhance public trust and confidence. That's why the League of Women Voters strongly supports it. The bill strengthens and aligns standards and eligibility requirements for law enforcement agency leaders. Standards will be the same regardless of where you live, whether you have a police chief or sheriff, whether that person is elected or appointed, whether they share your politics or not. And that matters to the League. Among other things, these standards will ensure that the people in charge of enforcing the law do not have a history of violating it, have not committed serious misconduct, are old enough to have completed their cognitive development, and have a high school diploma. And it makes clear that law enforcement leaders must maintain their certification and their eligibility to serve throughout their tenure in office, providing a clear process for steps to be taken by local governments if certification is revoked due to serious misconduct.
Thank you.
Thank you. And those are all our testifiers.
Oh, thank you, Vice Chair Macri. That will conclude the public hearing on substitute House Bill 1399.